The most dangerous sound in that room was not the Alpha King's voice. It was Claire Bennett trying not to breathe. In the great hall of Hollow Creek, 200 wolves stood beneath the cold white glow of the moon windows, silent enough to hear candle wax slide down silver holders. No one laughed. No one whispered. Tonight was the scent reckoning, and every Omega in the pack had been ordered to stand before the old stone dais, bare their wrists, and let the elders decide whether the moon had made them worthy. Claire stood last in line, where she had stood her entire life. Last at meals, last at training, last in every room where rank mattered more than kindness. Her pale hands were folded tightly in front of her gray dress, but beneath the sleeve, strips of thin silver cloth wrapped her left wrist. Stay small. Stay hidden. 10 years of practice had taught her how to lower her gaze before a dominant wolf noticed it, how to keep her footsteps light on old wood, how to smile when someone called her empty, broken, scentless. They thought she had no Omega fragrance at all. No sweetness. No warmth. No call. No sign that any mate bond would ever choose her. To Hollow Creek, Claire Bennett was a quiet mistake the moon had forgotten to finish. But Claire knew better. Her mother had known better too. The memory came back with the sharpness of cold air. Her mother kneeling in a dark pantry, tying silver cloth around Claire's small wrist with trembling fingers, whispering, "Never let them find what lives in you. And if the king ever comes, do not let him hear you." Claire had not understood then. But hearing? Hearing was for doors, footsteps, voices in the next room. Hearing was not supposed to find a soul. At the front of the hall, Elder Mason lifted his carved staff and struck it once against the stone floor. "Remove the bindings," he commanded. Madison Cole, the beta's daughter, turned her golden head just enough to smile at Claire. It was not a kind smile. It was the kind that promised a public lesson. "Don't be nervous, Claire," Madison said sweetly. "No one can expose what was never there." A few wolves near her breathed out soft amusement. Claire felt the sound crawl across her skin, but she did not answer. She only pressed her thumb against the hidden silver wrap and counted the seconds between her heartbeats. Slow. Slower. Be nothing. Be air. Then the doors at the far end of the hall opened without a hand touching them. The candles leaned inward as if the room itself had bowed. Every wolf turned. King Adrian Blackwood stepped inside wearing a long black coat dusted with rain, his dark hair brushed back from a face too still to be called beautiful and too commanding to be called cruel. His eyes were silver, not soft gray, not blue, but the color of moonlight caught on a blade. Hollow Creek dropped to one knee. Claire moved with them, lowering herself before anyone could notice the way her breath had caught. The Alpha King did not look around like other rulers. He did not lift his chin to taste the air. He did not search for scent. He simply stood in the doorway and listened. And in the terrible silence that followed, Claire realized her heart had become the loudest thing in the hall. King Adrian Blackwood did not speak at first, and somehow that was worse than any command. The silence spread from the doorway to the rafters, pressing down on every bowed head in Hollow Creek's great hall. Claire kept her eyes on the stone floor, tracing the thin white veins in the marble as if they could lead her out of her own body. One breath. Two. Slow enough to seem calm. Quiet enough to seem harmless. But the silver cloth beneath her sleeve had begun to sting, and the old mixture of ash and winter mint was drying against her skin. If it cracked before the ceremony ended, if even a thread of what she carried slipped into the air, the whole pack would stop laughing. They would remember why her mother had died with fear in her eyes. Elder Mason cleared his throat carefully, bowing so low his gray beard nearly touched his chest. "Your Majesty, Hollow Creek welcomes you beneath the full moon. We are honored by your presence at our scent reckoning." The king's gaze moved slowly across the hall, but Claire noticed something strange. He did not look at faces the way other wolves did. His eyes passed over posture, hands, shoulders, throats. He seemed to listen to bodies before he judged them, as if every person in the room was a locked door and every heartbeat was a key turning inside it. "Continue," Adrian said. His voice was calm, deep, and almost soft, but the word traveled through the hall like winter crossing water. Claire stood behind them all, feeling smaller with every name called. She remembered being 13 and standing outside the training yard while Madison Cole and her friends practiced scent recognition with silk ribbons. They had blindfolded one another, laughing as they guessed lavender, pine, smoke, apple blossom. When Claire's turn came, Madison had pressed a ribbon to her face and said, "Guess yours." The ribbon had smelled like nothing. The girls had called her Hollow after that. By 16, the whole pack used it. Hollow Claire. Empty Omega. A girl with pale skin, quiet eyes, and no future any wolf could sense. They were wrong, but surviving had required letting them be wrong. Now it rose inside her as Madison stepped forward in a pale blue dress, offering her wrist with practiced grace. The air filled with the bright scent of wild roses after rain. Admiration stirred through the crowd. Madison smiled, then turned her head toward Claire. "Perhaps we should save time," she said, her voice light enough to sound innocent. "Everyone knows the last girl has nothing to offer." Laughter fluttered and died quickly when the Alpha King's eyes shifted. Not to Madison, to Claire. Her heart stumbled once. Adrian tilted his head, listening, and Claire understood with sudden, chilling certainty that he had heard it. Claire lowered her head before anyone could read the fear moving through her face. But fear had its own sound, and King Adrian Blackwood seemed to hear every fragile note of it. The hall remained frozen around her, full of perfume and moonlight and the quiet pride of wolves who had never needed to hide what they were. Madison's rose scent still hung in the air, bright and pleased with itself, while Claire's wrist burned beneath the silver cloth. She could feel the wrap loosening where sweat had softened the knot. "Not now," she begged silently. "Not in front of him. Not in front of all of them." Elder Mason frowned toward her as if her silence had become disrespectful. "Claire Bennett," he called. Her name sounded small in the vast room, almost swallowed by the banners overhead. "Step forward." She moved because refusing would draw more attention, and attention had always been the first step toward danger. The stones felt cold even through the soles of her worn shoes. Each step carried her past faces she had known all her life and never trusted. Mrs. Cole, with her pearls and sharp eyes. Nathan Reed, who had once told the younger pups that Claire was proof the moon could make mistakes. Madison, smiling as though she had been waiting years for this exact moment. Claire stopped before the dais and lifted her right wrist, the bare one, the safe one. A few wolves laughed under their breath. "Wrong hand," Madison said. "Unless you forgot how this works." Claire kept her eyes down. "This is enough." "It is not," Elder Mason said, though unease flickered in his voice now that the king was watching. "All bindings must be removed for the reckoning." Claire's fingers closed over her left sleeve. "But why?" Claire had whispered. Her mother had looked toward the dark window, as if something beyond it had called her name. "Because what lives in you is not weakness. It is a door. And there are people who would rather lock a door forever than admit they need what is behind it." The memory faded as Madison stepped closer in the hall, her pale blue skirt brushing the stone. "Poor Claire," she said sweetly, still pretending there is some mystery under all that silence. Claire looked past her, toward the king, and found him absolutely still. Adrian's gaze moved to her covered wrist. "Who wrapped that?" he asked. The question was quiet, but it emptied the room of every other sound. Claire's throat tightened. She could have lied. She had spent 10 years surviving on small lies, harmless lies, invisible lies. But before she could speak, Madison reached for the edge of Claire's sleeve with a bright, triumphant smile. "Let us help her be honest, Your Majesty." Claire stepped back too late. The silver knot slipped loose. The cloth fell into Madison's hand. For one breath, nothing happened. No fragrance bloomed. No warmth filled the air. The pack began to laugh again, relieved and cruelly delighted. Then the Alpha King turned fully toward Claire, his expression changing by a fraction, and whispered as if he had heard a prayer beneath the floorboards. "There you are." The words did not rise above a whisper, yet they seemed to reach every corner of the great hall. Claire felt them settle against her skin with more weight than any shout. "There you are. Not what are you? Not what have you hidden? There you are," as if King Adrian Blackwood had been searching for her long before he ever crossed the rain-dark courtyard of Hollow Creek. Madison's smile faltered, though she tried to hold it in place. The silver cloth dangled from her fingers, harmless-looking now, just a strip of pale fabric stained with ash and winter mint. "Your Majesty," she said with a small laugh that sounded too sharp in the silence. "There is nothing there. Everyone can tell. She is exactly what we always knew she was." No one answered. Claire could not move. Her left wrist felt strangely cold without the binding. exposed to the air for the first time in years before more than one person. Still, no scent filled the room. No sweet omega warmth drifted outward. No visible proof rose to defend her. To the pack, that meant emptiness. To Claire, it meant the deeper seal had not broken yet. To Adrian, it seemed to mean something else entirely. He took one step forward, and every wolf in the hall lowered their eyes. He moved without hurry, but the space changed around him. It was not fear exactly. It was awareness, the way the forest becomes aware of thunder before the first drop of rain. Elder Mason straightened nervously. "Your Majesty, if the girl has disturbed the ceremony, I assure you she can be removed." Adrian did not look at him. No, Claire's breath caught before she could stop it. Adrian stopped walking at once. His head tilted, just slightly. She saw it then, the terrible precision of him. He had heard that tiny broken inhale from nearly 30 feet away. He had followed it the way another wolf would follow blood on snow or smoke through trees. "Everyone be silent," he commanded. The hall obeyed so completely that even the candles seemed to quiet. Claire heard her own pulse at the base of her throat. She tried to slow it, but panic had already placed its hands around her ribs. Adrian closed his eyes. A murmur went through the pack and died before becoming words. The Alpha King stood among them like a man listening to music no one else could hear. His face remained calm, but something old moved behind that calm, something lonely and hungry for truth, not flesh, not power, but the one note in the world that had been missing from his life. Adrian opened his eyes. The silver in them had softened, not with pity, but with recognition. "Her scent is not absent," he said. Elder Mason went pale. Madison's fingers tightened around the fallen cloth. Claire shook her head once, so small only the king seemed to notice. "Please," her eyes begged. "Please do not say it." But Adrian was no longer looking only at her wrist. His gaze had lifted to her face, to the trembling line of her mouth, to the place below her collarbone where her heart betrayed every secret she had ever buried. "It is buried beneath sound," he finished. The room stirred in confusion. Adrian turned his head slightly, and the movement silenced them again. Someone taught this Omega how to disappear from wolves. Claire's knees weakened, but she stayed standing. Madison let out a nervous breath. "That is impossible." Adrian's eyes cut to her, not harshly, but with such cold certainty that she stepped back. "Impossible things do not frighten me, Miss Cole. Hidden things do." Then he raised his hand, and the guards at the doors crossed their staffs without a word. The great hall sealed shut. Claire felt the last path of escape vanish behind her. Adrian looked back at her, and his voice lowered until it reached only the part of her that had been hiding for 10 years. "Who told you to hide from me, Claire Bennett?" Claire could not answer because the truth had never belonged only to her. But there was nothing simple about the way King Adrian Blackwood watched her. He was not looking at her as if she were a criminal. He was looking at her as if she were a song he had once known in a dream. "I asked you a question," he said, not unkindly. Claire swallowed. "My mother." A ripple moved through the room. Elder Mason's face tightened. "Her name," Adrian said. Claire forced herself to lift her chin. "Evelyn Bennett." The name struck the hall harder than any staff against stone. Elder Mason lowered his eyes too quickly. Madison's mother went still as porcelain. Even the torches seemed to lean away from the walls. Claire felt the old fear return, but beneath it something else stirred. A strange bright ache she had spent years pressing down until it felt like part of her bones. Adrian turned slowly toward the elder. She was a troubled Omega. Claire's hands curled into fists at her sides. Troubled. That was what they had called her mother after she died. Not brave. Not hunted. Not frightened enough to teach her daughter how to vanish before she was old enough to understand why. She was not troubled, Claire said. Her voice shook, but it carried. She was scared. Elder Mason's expression hardened. "Child, you do not understand what your mother carried." "No," Adrian said quietly. "But you did." The accusation was gentle, and somehow that made it impossible to escape. Elder Mason looked suddenly older beneath the moon windows. Claire felt the room shifting around her, not in sympathy yet, but in uncertainty. The pack had known one version of her life for so long that they did not know what to do with another. Madison recovered first, stepping forward with forced brightness. "Your Majesty, this is becoming unnecessary." Claire has always wanted attention. She hides behind strange stories because she has no real value in the reckoning. Her words landed softly, polished and practiced, but Claire heard the cruelty inside them. So did the king. Adrian did not raise his voice. Pick up the cloth. Madison blinked. I beg your pardon. The binding you removed from her wrist. Pick it up. Madison hesitated, then bent and lifted the silver strip with 2 fingers, as though it were beneath her. Adrian watched her face. What do you smell? Madison frowned. Ash, winter mint, old herbs, and beneath that, Madison's confidence flickered. She brought it closer, then stiffened. Claire saw the moment recognition touched her. Not understanding, not truth, just the first impossible note of it. Madison dropped the cloth as if it had burned her pride. Nothing. Adrian stepped closer to Claire, slow enough to let her move away if she wished. She did not. Her heart beat too fast, but her feet stayed rooted to the stone. Not nothing, he said. A lock. He looked at the sealed doors, then at the pack. And locks are made by people who fear what is behind them. Claire's wrist began to warm. The air around her changed, almost too subtly to notice, like moonlight slipping under a closed door. A few wolves lifted their heads. Madison took 1 step back. Claire felt panic rise. The deeper seal was thinning. Adrian heard it before anyone sensed it. His gaze returned to her with sudden urgency. Not command, not possession, but warning. Claire, he said softly, do not run. But fear was older than trust. The candles flickered. Someone whispered her mother's name, and Claire turned toward the side passage and ran. Claire did not know where she was running until the great hall vanished behind her and the narrow servant corridor swallowed her in darkness. The old passage smelled of rain-soaked stone, candle smoke, and the dried bundles of sage that hung from the rafters to keep winter damp away. Her shoes slipped once on the polished floor, but she caught herself against the wall and kept moving, 1 hand pressed over her left wrist as if she could hold the secret inside her skin by force. Behind her, voices rose in the hall, shocked and overlapping, but one voice cut through them all with quiet command. No one follows her. Adrian. The words should have comforted her. They did not. Claire knew kings could sound gentle when they gave orders. She knew power did not always need to shout. She had learned that from Hollow Creek, from elders who smiled while deciding which children were worth protecting, from neighbors who called cruelty tradition because it made them feel clean. The corridor opened into the kitchen, empty now except for cooling bread, stacked plates, and a single lantern burning beside. The back door. Claire crossed the room in 3 quick steps and pushed outside into the night. Cold rain touched her face like a warning. The courtyard was silver with puddles. Beyond it, the tree line waited, black and familiar. The same woods where she had hidden as a child when the other pups practiced shifting and she pretended not to care. She ran toward it. The moment her feet touched wet grass, the warmer feeling under her skin spread higher up her arm. Not pain. That would have been easier. This was memory waking. This was the part of her mother that had never truly died. The hidden inheritance Claire had wrapped, soaked, silenced, and denied for 10 years. She reached the first line of pines and pulled a handful of mud from the ground, rubbing it over her wrist, then her neck, then the pulse beneath her jaw. It was childish, desperate, useless against a man who did not need scent. Still, fear made her do it. Think, Claire, she whispered to herself. Think. But before she could take another step, every sound in the forest seemed to fall away. Not stop. Fall, as if the night itself had lowered its head. Claire froze. Instead, from somewhere near the edge of the courtyard, Adrian spoke in a voice so calm it felt closer than it was. You are stepping on wet pine needles. They bend differently when you are afraid. Claire pressed both hands over her mouth. He was not in front of her. He was not beside her. He was at least 40 yards away, hidden by rain and shadow, and still he knew exactly where she stood. I told them not to follow, he said. I did not say I would let you disappear. Claire's eyes burned, but she refused to cry. That is not your choice. A pause. Rain whispered between them. No, Adrian said. It is yours. But you are running from the wrong danger. She almost laughed, a broken sound she trapped behind her teeth. You locked the doors. To keep them away from you. You questioned me in front of everyone. Because the ones who taught you to hide were standing in that room. His answer reached her softly, without defense, and that made it harder to hate. Claire backed deeper into the trees, slow and careful. Her pulse betrayed her. Anyway, Adrian heard each beat. She could feel it in the silence, the terrible attention of a king who listened as if her heart were speaking a language only he remembered. "My mother told me not to let you hear me," Claire said. The words came out before she could stop them. This time, Adrian did not answer right away. When he did, his voice had changed. Not weaker, less distant. "Then Evelyn Bennett knew what lives inside my curse." Claire's breath stilled. Across the rain-dark woods, she sensed him take one careful step, not closer to capture her, but closer to the truth. "And she knew," Adrian said, "that if I ever heard your soul, I would never be able to forget it." Claire stood among the pines with rain sliding down her face, and for the first time in 10 years, the name Evelyn Bennett did not sound like a secret buried under dirt. It sounded alive. It sounded dangerous. "You knew my mother," Claire said. The question should have been an accusation, but it came out thinner than that, wrapped in all the years she had spent missing a woman no one would speak of kindly. Adrian remained beyond the trees, a tall shadow at the edge of the courtyard light. He did not rush her. He did not order her closer. He listened, and somehow his stillness gave her more room than Hollow Creek had ever allowed. "I met her once," he said, "long before I wore the crown. She came to the northern court carrying a child wrapped in a blue blanket and a warning no one wanted to believe." Claire's hand tightened around the muddy fabric at her wrist. "Me? Yes." The word moved through the rain like a door opening slowly. Claire wanted to run again, but her feet had gone cold and heavy in the wet grass. The woods behind her promised distance, but not answers. "What was the warning?" Claire asked. Adrian stepped into a thin band of moonlight between the trees. Rain darkened his coat and shone in his black hair, but his eyes held the same silver calm. "That the curse on my bloodline was not only a curse. It was a call. One day, it would stop answering healers, priests, and royal blood. It would answer only one sound." Claire felt the warmth beneath her skin pulse once. Not painfully, but clearly, like a lantern being uncovered inside her chest. "My sound." Adrian did not deny it. "Your soul scent carries through heartbeat, breath, and voice. Wolves like Hollow Creek could not smell it because it was never meant for them." Behind them, from inside the great hall, a muffled argument rose and faded. Claire glanced toward the courtyard. "They will come." "Not yet," Adrian said. "They are too busy deciding which lie to protect first." There was no pride in his voice, only weariness. For a moment, he looked less like a king and more like a man who had spent years listening to rooms full of people pretending not to be afraid. Claire took one careful step back. "And what do you want from me?" Adrian's expression changed. The question had reached something deeper than power. "I want the truth," he said, "and I want you safe enough to choose what comes after it." Claire searched his face for the trap. She knew how promises sounded when they were made for show. She knew how mercy could become a leash when spoken by the wrong mouth. But Adrian's hands remained at his sides, open and empty. He had followed her across rain, stone, and shadow, yet he still stood far enough away that she could run if fear demanded it. That distance broke something in her more gently than kindness should have. "If I go back," she whispered, "they will call me a danger." "They already called you nothing," Adrian said. "I found that less believable." A breath escaped her, almost a laugh, almost a sob. The warmth under her skin rose again, and this time the air around them shimmered faintly, silver rather than sweet, sound rather than scent. Adrian went still, not with hunger, with awe. Claire felt it too, a quiet note trembling between them, fragile and bright, as if the moon had lowered itself into the forest and was waiting to see whether she would hide from it again. Then the doors of the great hall opened behind them. An elder mason's voice carried across the rain. "Your Majesty, step away from that girl." Adrian did not turn. His eyes stayed on Claire. "Now you will hear the lie," he said softly. "And this time, Claire Bennett, you will not be the one forced to carry it." Elder Mason stood beneath the rain with half the pack gathered behind him, their fine reckoning clothes darkening at the hems, their faces caught between fear and curiosity. Madison remained near her mother, arms folded tightly, but there was no triumph left in her posture now. Claire noticed how no one stepped ahead of the elder. They had followed him out of the great hall, yet they hid behind his certainty as if it were a wall. "Your Majesty," Elder Mason said again, his voice carefully measured, "that girl is unstable. Her mother was unstable before her." Hollow Creek contained the problem for the safety of the pack and the crown. The word contained moved through Claire like cold water. Not protected, not helped, contained. Adrian finally turned, slow enough that the entire courtyard seemed to tighten around the motion. You wrapped a child in silence and called it safety. Elder Mason lifted his chin. We followed Evelyn Bennett's own instructions. She begged us to keep Claire hidden. Adrian did not look at Mason. He looked at Claire. Listen beneath the words. Claire frowned through the rain. I do not know how. Yes, you do, he said. You have done it all your life. You hear when a room goes cruel before anyone speaks. You hear when kindness is real. You hear when your own name is used like a door closing. The warmth inside her chest answered him. Claire closed her eyes, not because she trusted the gift, but because she was too tired to keep refusing it. At first there was only rain, then breathing, then the quick, nervous flutter of Madison's pulse. Then Elder Mason's voice, repeating, we only protected her. But under the words was something else, a thin cracked sound, like ice under a boot. A lie. Claire opened her eyes. She did not ask you to keep me hidden forever, she whispered. Elder Mason stiffened. Adrian's gaze sharpened. Claire heard more now, not thoughts, not secrets and sentences, but the weight behind them. My mother asked for time, she said, the truth forming as she spoke it. She asked you to protect me until the crown found a cure. But you never sent word. You let everyone think I was nothing because nothing was easier to control. Elder Mason's face drained of color. You cannot prove that. Adrian stepped back, giving Claire the center without forcing her into it. She does not need to. I can. He lifted his left hand into the moonlight. Dark markings, faint as smoke beneath glass, moved along his wrist in slow, restless patterns. The pack drew in a single startled breath, but Claire could not look away. The markings did not frighten her. They sounded lonely. That was the only way her mind could name it. Lonely, old, and exhausted from being mistaken for darkness. The curse answers falsehood, Adrian said. Every lie spoken near me feeds it. His silver eyes found Claire through the rain. Until you ran. Claire understood then why he had followed. Not to claim, not to punish, to breathe inside a silence he had not heard in years. What happens if it gets louder? She asked. Adrian's expression did not change, but the rain between them seemed colder. One day I will hear nothing else. The answer was gentle and devastating. Around them, Hollow Creek stood wordless, watching the girl they had mocked become the only person the Alpha King had asked for help. Claire stepped closer, 1 inch, then another. No one stopped her. No one dared. What do you need me to do? Adrian lowered his hand, his voice quieter than the rain. Only what you choose. The words settled deep, breaking the last chain fear had left around her heart. Claire looked at the moving shadows beneath his skin, then at the pack who had called her hollow because they could not hear what she carried. For the first time, she did not hide her breath. She let it out slowly, and the silver warmth inside her unfolded through the courtyard like moonlight over still water. Adrian closed his eyes. The restless markings on his wrist paused. And Claire Bennett, the girl Hollow Creek had buried in silence, finally understood that her soul had never been the danger. It had always been the answer. The silver warmth did not burst from Claire like a weapon. It opened like morning through curtains that had been closed for too long. One breath left her, then another, and the courtyard changed around that quiet rhythm. Rain softened. Torches steadied. Even the restless shadows beneath Adrian Blackwood's skin slowed, as if they had finally found a song gentle enough to follow. Claire stood a few feet from him, trembling, not because she was weak, but because she had spent half her life believing the truest part of her was something that needed to be buried. Adrian kept his eyes closed, one hand lifted but not reaching for her, giving her gift space to choose its own shape. The pack watched in silence as the markings on his wrist faded from smoke-dark lines to pale silver threads, then settled beneath his skin like moonlight sinking into water. A breath moved through the crowd, stunned and unguarded. Adrian opened his eyes. They were still silver, still royal, but the terrible distance inside them had eased. He looked at Claire first, not at the elder, not at the pack, not at the crown guards waiting by the sealed doors. Are you all right? He asked. The question was so simple that it nearly broke her. No one in Hollow Creek had ever asked it before deciding what she was worth. Claire nodded once, though her throat ached with all the answers she did not know how to say. Adrian turned then, and the softness left his face, replaced by something steady and just. Evelyn Bennett came to this pack asking for protection for her daughter, he said. His voice carried across the rain-washed courtyard without rising. Instead, her child was mocked, diminished, and made to believe survival required silence. That ends tonight. Elder Mason bowed his head. Your Majesty, we made mistakes. No, Adrian said. A mistake is a door left open in a storm. What happened here was a door locked from the outside. The words moved through the pack like a bell. Claire felt them in her bones. Not revenge. Not cruelty. Naming. The first honest naming she had ever been given. Adrian faced the gathered wolves. From this night forward, Claire Bennett is under the protection of the crown until she decides where she wishes to stand. No one will touch her bindings. No one will speak her name with contempt. No one will call her hollow again. Madison lowered her eyes first, then her mother, then Nathan Reed. One by one, the wolves of Hollow Creek bowed, not to the king this time, but toward the girl they had spent years overlooking. Adrian stepped closer, stopping an arm's length away. You owe me nothing, he said quietly, for her alone. Not your gift, not your trust, not your future. Claire looked at his wrist, where the curse had quieted beneath the skin. Then she looked at the pack, still bowed in the rain, and finally understood that hiding had kept her alive, but it would not be the thing that made her free. She lifted her uncovered wrist into the moonlight. The silver warmth answered softly, not for the crown, not for Hollow Creek, but for herself. I want to know the truth about my mother, she said. Adrian's expression gentled. Then we begin there. He offered his hand, palm open, waiting. Claire took it because she chose to. And the moment their fingers met, the courtyard filled with a clear, quiet note that every wolf could feel, but only the king could truly hear. It was not a claim. It was not a cage. It was the sound of a hidden soul stepping into the open at last.